I didn't see it coming. No one ever does, right? I always thought I'd be prepared. I mean, as a mother, I'd seen the signs before. The way Jason started shutting me out during his teenage years, the long silences at the dinner table, the occasional bitter look when I tried to get him to talk. But none of it was new. Every parent goes through this. It's just the natural course of things, I told myself. They grow up, they grow apart. But still, I wasn't ready. It started that morning. I remember it so clearly, it's like it's burned into my memory. The soft sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, casting golden beams across the worn-out countertops. It was one of those perfect mornings when the air feels light and the world seems peaceful, even if only for a moment. I had just finished making my coffee, the familiar smell filling the kitchen as I reached for my favorite mug. It had a crack down the side from years of use, but I never cared. Mark, my husband, had bought it for me on our anniversary 5 years ago. I didn't care that it was chipped or cracked. It was mine, a small, imperfect token of love. I poured the hot coffee slowly, savoring the warmth that spread through my fingers. It was still early, Jason was still sleeping. It had been a while since he had been home under our roof for longer than a couple of days. He started working part-time at a local coffee shop, a job he had taken on during his summer break from college. He'd come back to stay with us temporarily. He was saving up for a new place, he said. But his presence in the house, while appreciated, felt different. He was quieter now, more distant. I didn't mind. It was just a phase, I told myself, just a transition. He was becoming a man after all. But that morning, as I stood in the kitchen, everything changed. "Mom," Jason's voice sliced through the silence, sharp and low. "We need to talk." My hands faltered, spilling a little coffee as I turned around to face him. There was something in his voice, something that sent an icy chill down my spine. Jason was standing in the doorway, his arms crossed, his posture stiff. He looked older than he did just a few months ago, his face more set, more hardened. The once soft expression I'd always loved to see on my baby's face was gone. His brown hair was still messy, falling into his eyes, but it no longer had that youthful charm to it. His eyes, those deep, brown eyes that used to sparkle with innocence, now looked cold, distant, as if something inside him had already turned away. I wiped my hands on my apron and took a deep breath, forcing a smile. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" I tried to sound calm, but I could already feel the panic rising in my chest. He didn't smile back, didn't soften. He just stared at me for a long, uncomfortable moment. "I need you to leave," he said, his voice steady, devoid of emotion. For a second, I thought I had misheard him. "What?" The word came out in a whisper, too weak for the force of what I was feeling. Jason's face didn't change. "I need you to leave," he repeated, this time more firmly. "I can't live with you anymore, Mom." The air in the room felt heavier. I could barely breathe, as if something, some unseen force, had wrapped itself around my lungs, squeezing them tighter and tighter. "Leave, Jason, I don't understand." I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat a drum of panic. My voice faltered as I tried to find the right words. "What do you mean leave? Why?" He stepped into the kitchen, his gaze never leaving mine. "You've been living here too long. You're always here, always in the way. I can't breathe, I can't think. I'm not a little kid anymore, Mom. I need my space." I didn't understand. I couldn't. This wasn't Jason. This wasn't the boy I'd spent 18 years raising, the boy who once looked to me for comfort, for guidance, for love. You're saying you want me to leave? Your own mother?" My voice trembled, and I hated that it did. "Jason, what happened to us? I thought we were okay. I thought we were close." He shook his head, his face tightening with frustration. "We're not. You're smothering me. I never asked you to do everything for me. You never gave me the chance to be my own person. And now, I'm done." I stood there, frozen. The room seemed to spin around me, everything becoming a blur of shapes and sounds. My hands were shaking, and I set my coffee mug down so it wouldn't spill. "I don't understand," I whispered again. "Why? What did I do wrong?" Jason didn't answer. Instead, he just turned away, walking toward the front door. "I'm done talking about it. You need to go, Mom." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. "You can't be serious." I followed him, my voice rising in disbelief. "You can't just throw me out like this. I've always been here for you. I've given you everything, everything." He paused at the door, glancing back at me with a look of indifference I didn't recognize. "Maybe you've given me everything, but I didn't ask for it. I didn't want it. It was like a wall had gone up between us. He was right there, but he was so far away, and it hurt more than anything I'd ever felt. The boy who had once run to me with scraped knees, the boy who had trusted me to make everything better, was now pushing me away. I could feel the weight of the years in those words. I could feel the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the moments I had poured into being his mother, all of it being erased in a matter of seconds. Jason turned to leave, but I couldn't let him go. I couldn't let him walk away from me like that. Not without understanding, not without a chance to fix things. Jason, please. I reached for him, but he shrugged off my touch, his back still turned to me. Please, don't do this, don't push me away. His shoulders stiffened, but he didn't say anything. He just opened the door and stepped outside, leaving me standing there in the empty silence of the kitchen, my heart breaking in a way I didn't know was possible. I wanted to chase him, to beg him to stay, to beg him to love me again, but I didn't. I just stood there, motionless, as the door slammed behind him. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours. The world outside the kitchen window was still. Everything was still. But inside, my world was shattering, piece by piece. I didn't know how long I stood there, my heart heavy with confusion and sorrow. It felt like the end, but I couldn't be sure. I couldn't understand how this could be happening. Finally, I heard Mark's voice from the other room, distant, cold. Are you going to stand there all day, or are you going to pack your stuff? I didn't answer. What was there left to say? And so, I began to pack. The silence in the house was suffocating. It wasn't the kind of silence that comes after a long, peaceful day when everyone is winding down, content in the comfort of home. No, this silence was different. It was the kind that filled every corner, every room with an unbearable weight, making it harder to breathe with each passing second. I had barely moved when I heard Mark's voice again. He didn't even bother to look at me, his gaze still glued to the television as I stood frozen in the doorway. You need to pack your things, he repeated, his voice dull, tired. It's not like you don't know what's going on, just go. I didn't respond. There was no point in arguing. Mark hadn't truly looked at me in years, and now, standing there in the doorway, his words cut deeper than any silence between us ever had. I didn't know what hurt more, the fact that Jason had asked me to leave, or that Mark, my husband of 23 years, didn't even seem to care. I turned away from him, heading up the stairs to our room, the room that used to be mine and Mark's, ours, the room that had once been filled with laughter, with shared moments, with love. Now, it felt like a hollow shell. The walls were the same color they had been when we first painted them, a warm, soft beige, the kind that made the room feel cozy and inviting. The bed was still in the center, covered with the same comforter, a faded floral pattern that Mark had hated but had never dared to change. Everything was in its place, just as it always had been, but the room felt foreign, empty. I stood in the middle of the room, staring at the closet door. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to start. Everything around me seemed surreal, as if I had stepped into a dream, one where I wasn't the mother, I wasn't the wife, I wasn't the person I had been just hours before. I ran my fingers through my hair, trying to steady my thoughts. I knew I had to pack. I had to leave. Jason had made it clear that he didn't want me there. But how could I leave? How could I just walk away from the life I had built? I opened the closet and started pulling clothes off the hangers, throwing them into a duffel bag. It was mechanical, the motion of my hands as I stuffed shirt after shirt into the bag, but my mind wasn't on the clothes. My mind was on Jason, on the words he had said, on the look in his eyes when he had asked me to leave. You're smothering me. I need space. I can't breathe. Those words echoed in my mind over and over again. I had spent so much of my life trying to make him feel loved, trying to make him feel supported. I had sacrificed so much of myself for him. And yet, here I was, packing up the life I had built for him, for us. I couldn't understand it. How had it all gone wrong? How had Jason, my sweet, loving boy, become a stranger? I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but I didn't allow them to fall. I couldn't cry. Not now. Not when everything I had worked for was crumbling around me. I finished packing the bag and turned to the bed, where Mark was still sitting, staring at the television. His indifference was suffocating. I had hoped that maybe, just maybe, he would try to stop me, that he would say something, anything, to make me stay. But there was nothing, just silence. I didn't know how long I stood there, looking at him. I didn't know how long I stood there, waiting for something to break, but nothing did. Finally, I turned away, my duffel bag in hand, and walked out of the room. I made my way downstairs, my footsteps heavy, each one feeling like a final goodbye. When I reached the living room, Mark didn't look up. He didn't say a word. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice flat, as if I were simply going out for a walk. "I'm going to my sister," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Right," he muttered, his attention still glued to the screen. "Whatever." I couldn't hold back the tears any longer. I blinked rapidly, trying to push them away, but they came, relentless, falling down my cheeks like a stream that had been dammed for too long. "Mark, are we really done?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Is this it? After everything we've been through, after all the years, you don't even care anymore?" Finally, he looked up, but his eyes weren't filled with anger or even sadness. They were filled with something far worse, apathy, disinterest. "I don't know what you want me to say," he said, his voice detached. "We've been living in different worlds for a long time now. You've been too focused on Jason, on everyone but me. What did you think would happen?" His words cut deeper than I expected. He was right, in a way. I had spent years trying to make everything perfect for Jason, trying to fix everything that was wrong in his life. And somewhere along the way, I had lost myself. Somewhere along the way, I had lost Mark, too. I didn't know how to respond. So I didn't. I just turned and walked toward the door, my heart heavy with the weight of everything I was leaving behind. As I stepped outside, the cold air hit my face, and I realized that it wasn't just the house I was leaving. I was leaving the family I had worked so hard to build. I was leaving the life I had known for over 20 years. I was walking away from everything. The car ride to my sister's house felt endless. The streets blurred past me, the city I had known for so long now feeling unfamiliar, foreign. I wasn't sure where I was going, or if I was even going to the right place. But I didn't know where else to go. When I finally pulled up to her apartment building, it was dark outside, the lights of the building casting a soft glow on the sidewalk. I sat in the car for a few moments, staring at the door, wondering if I had made the right decision. But when I finally stepped out of the car, I knew there was no turning back. I walked to the door, my bag heavy in my hands, and knocked. A few moments later, the door opened, and there stood my sister, Rachel. She took one look at me and frowned. "What's going on?" she asked, concern in her eyes. I didn't answer at first. I just stood there, feeling the weight of everything that had happened in the last few hours pressing down on me. "Come inside," she said softly, stepping aside to let me in. I walked past her and into the living room, my eyes scanning the small, cozy space that used to be mine. "Jason asked me to leave," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Rachel didn't say anything for a long moment. She just watched me, her eyes filled with pity and sadness. Finally, she walked over to the couch and sat down, patting the seat next to her. "Come here," she said, her voice gentle. I sat down next to her, my hands shaking in my lap. "He's all grown up now," I said, my voice cracking. "He doesn't need me anymore. I don't know what to do." Rachel reached over and pulled me into her arms, holding me tightly. I didn't cry. I couldn't, but the emptiness inside me grew, and I could feel the loss settling in like a cold, heavy blanket. And as I sat there, in my sister's arms, I couldn't help but wonder, where did it all go wrong? Had I really smothered Jason? Had I really pushed him away without even realizing it? Or was I just a mother trying her best to love her son, and somehow, in the process, I lost him? I didn't know, and that was the worst part of it all. I didn't know what to do anymore. I didn't know where to go from here. I didn't know how to fix what had been broken. And deep down, I knew that no matter where I went, no matter what I did, I would never be the same again. The silence in Rachel's apartment felt different from the silence at home. It wasn't the hollow, suffocating kind that had crept through the walls of my house the last few days. It wasn't the kind that followed you around, whispering the secrets of everything you had lost. Here, the silence was softer, filled with the quiet comfort of my sister's presence. But it was still there, heavy and unwelcome, pressing down on me as I sat on her couch, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. My mind was too loud, too filled with the chaos of everything that had just unraveled. Jason's words, cold and final, kept echoing in my head. "You're smothering me. I can't breathe." How had I let it get to this point? How had my son, my only son, become someone who could look at me and say those words without a shred of hesitation, as if he were talking to a stranger? The next morning, Rachel made me coffee, but I didn't drink it. It sat on the table in front of me, a steaming reminder of the life I used to have. I could see the way Rachel was watching me, the pity in her eyes that made me want to shrink away, but I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything except sit there and let the pain wash over me, over and over again. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked gently, setting the coffee cup down in front of me. I shook my head, not trusting my voice. What was there to say? How could I explain the feeling of betrayal, the crushing weight of knowing that my own child no longer wanted me? How could I put into words the emptiness that had filled every corner of my soul, as if the very essence of who I was had been erased in one swift moment? Rachel didn't press me. She knew me well enough to understand that I needed space, that I needed time. And I hated that I needed time. I hated that I couldn't just fix it, couldn't just make everything right again. But the more I tried to make sense of it, the more I realized I was powerless. There was nothing I could do. Jason had made his decision. And I had no choice but to accept it, no matter how much it tore me apart. The days that followed were a blur. I stayed with Rachel, moving through her small apartment like a ghost, my footsteps barely making a sound on the hardwood floors. She tried to make conversation, tried to get me to eat, to do something, but all I could do was stare out the window, watching the world go by, feeling more and more disconnected from everything. I wasn't living. I was just existing. Rachel had her own life to live, and I could see the strain in her eyes every time I caught her watching me. She was worried, and I hated that I was the cause of it. But what could I do? What could anyone do when the person you loved the most had turned their back on you? On the third day, I finally forced myself to pick up the phone. I dialed Jason's number, my fingers trembling as I held the phone to my ear. It rang once, twice, 3 times. And then his voicemail picked up, the sound of his voice like a dagger to my heart. I didn't leave a message. I couldn't. I didn't know what to say. I hung up, my hands shaking so badly that the phone almost slipped from my grasp. The familiar weight of rejection pressed down on me once more, suffocating me. It wasn't just Jason who had rejected me. It was the whole life I had built, the years of love, sacrifice, and devotion that now seemed meaningless in the face of his cold, indifferent words. I couldn't just sit here forever. I couldn't let this consume me. I had to do something, but I didn't know what. I didn't know where to turn. I had no home to go back to, no family to rely on, and the one person I had given everything to had shut me out completely. By the end of the week, I was still in limbo. I had no direction, no purpose. Every time I thought about Jason, about what had happened, the pain in my chest deepened. I couldn't help but wonder if I had failed him, if I had done something wrong, if I had been too much of a mother. But what was I supposed to have done differently? Wasn't I supposed to love him, to care for him, to make sure he grew up right? I wanted to believe that he would come to his senses, that he would realize how much he needed me, but deep down, I knew that was just wishful thinking. Something inside him had changed, and I didn't know if there was any way to fix it. The boy I had raised was gone, and in his place was a man who didn't want me, who didn't need me. The emptiness in my chest seemed to grow by the day, filling me with a kind of hopelessness I didn't know I was capable of feeling. I was drowning in my own grief, but I couldn't find a way to stop it. I didn't want to burden Rachel any longer. I could see the way she was looking at me, as though she was waiting for me to snap out of it, to get back to who I was before all of this. But I didn't know who that person was anymore. I didn't know who I was anymore. And then, 2 weeks after I had left home, the call came. It was from Mark. "Where are you?" His voice was strained, and there was an edge to it that I didn't recognize. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I hadn't spoken to him since I left. He hadn't tried to contact me. I hadn't expected him to. But now, hearing his voice, I felt a rush of emotions flood through me: relief, confusion, anger, sadness. "I'm at Rachel," I said, my voice quiet. "You need to come back," he said, his words sharp. "Jason, been calling. He's asking for you." I felt the world stop for a moment. What, Jason? Why, after everything? I don't know, Mark replied, his tone softer now, though there was still something guarded in his voice. But he said he needs you. He's sorry for what he said. I didn't know what to feel. I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe that my son was finally coming around, that maybe the distance between us wasn't as vast as I had thought. But part of me was terrified. What if it was just another lie? What if this was just another game he was playing, another way to make me feel like I was to blame for everything? "You're really going to make me go back there?" I asked, my voice breaking. "After everything he said, everything he did, you want me to just go back and act like nothing happened?" Mark didn't respond immediately. I could hear him sigh on the other end of the line. "I don't know what you should do, but you're his mother. He's still your son. You can't just give up on him. You can't walk away like this." I closed my eyes, letting his words sink in. He was right. He was right, and I knew it. I couldn't give up on Jason. I couldn't just walk away, even if it meant swallowing my pride and opening myself up to more hurt. But how could I go back? How could I face the boy who had torn my heart out and left me alone in a world I didn't recognize? I didn't know, but for the first time in days, a spark of hope flickered in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for us to heal. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe it was just the beginning of something else. I had no idea what that something else would look like, but I knew I couldn't keep running from it. So I packed my things. I wasn't sure if I was ready. I wasn't sure if I would ever be ready. But I knew one thing: I had to try, for Jason, for myself, for the mother I used to be. The drive back felt like a journey, through a maze of memories and regrets. I could barely see the road in front of me, my eyes blurred with the storm of emotions that churned within. I wasn't sure if I was ready. What was I going back to? Was I going to find the son I once knew, or was I just walking back into the same storm of rejection and hurt? Rachel had been quiet when I told her I was going. She had offered me her support, told me to do what felt right, but I could see the worry in her eyes. She knew as well as I did that things weren't going to be easy. They never were. But it was time. I had to face what I had been running from. I kept thinking about Jason's last words, the ones that haunted me every waking moment. "You're smothering me. I need space. I can't breathe." But now, somehow, the space between us had grown even wider, and I wondered if I had smothered him in more ways than I realized. My heart ached as I approached the house, the familiar sight of the old oak tree in the front yard. The porch swing that Jason and I had spent hours on, talking about everything and nothing. The flower beds Mark used to take pride in, now overgrown with weeds. And the house itself, which used to feel like a home. But now, it felt cold and distant, like a place I had once lived in but no longer belonged. I parked in the driveway, taking a deep breath before I even reached for the door. My hands were clammy, my body tense with anticipation and dread. I had no idea what to expect. What would Jason say? Would he even want to see me? And Mark, how would he react to me walking back in, after everything that had been said? I knocked softly on the door, hesitating before lifting my hand again to knock a second time. The door swung open, and there stood Mark. His face was hard to read, but there was something different in his eyes, something that was either exhaustion or concern. I couldn't quite tell. "Hi," I said, my voice quieter than I intended, thick with emotion. Mark stepped aside without a word, his eyes narrowing, but not with the same anger he had shown before. He didn't say anything as I walked past him into the house. I could feel the weight of his presence, but we didn't speak. Not yet. I didn't know what to say to him. The house smelled the same, like coffee and old wood, and I was struck by the sense of loss that washed over me. It felt like a dream, like I was standing in someone else's life, someone else's house. The life I had known, the family I had spent years building, seemed so far away now. And then I heard it, the sound of footsteps on the stairs, soft at first, then growing louder. My heart skipped a beat. I turned toward the stairs just as Jason appeared, his eyes locking with mine. He looked different. He was taller, leaner. The boy I had once known, the boy who used to run to me for everything, now stood in front of me like a stranger. His face was guarded, his expression distant, and for a moment I didn't know what to say. He stood there, frozen, and the seconds stretched into what felt like hours. My heart beat loudly in my chest, and I found myself almost holding my breath. "Mom," he said, his voice a little softer than I had expected. but there was still something cold in it, something unfamiliar. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words caught in my throat. I had so much I wanted to say. I wanted to scream, to beg him to tell me what I had done wrong, to make him see that I was still the same mother, still the same person who had given everything for him. But all I could do was stand there, in the entryway, like a stranger in my own home. Jason took a step toward me, then paused. I could see the internal struggle playing out on his face, the battle between what he wanted to say and what he was willing to show. He finally spoke, his voice strained. "I didn't mean what I said," he muttered, looking away as if the words embarrassed him. "I was angry. I don't know." I felt a sharp pain in my chest. He didn't mean it. After everything. After the coldness, the rejection, the hurt. The words felt empty now, as if they were just something he said to fill the silence between us. "Jason," my voice broke as I tried to speak, but I couldn't. I had no idea how to respond. I had spent so much time trying to understand, trying to forgive him for what he had said. And yet, here we were, standing in the same room, both of us broken in ways that words couldn't fix. He rubbed his eyes, a small sigh escaping his lips. "I'm sorry, okay? I know I messed up. I didn't know how to deal with everything. I thought pushing you away would make it easier." I swallowed hard, my hands trembling. "Jason, you can't just push me away like that. You can't just say things like that and expect everything to be fine." "I know," he said quietly, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I'm sorry, I was frustrated. You were always there, always trying to fix everything, and I didn't know how to handle it. It felt like you were suffocating me. I wanted to find my own way, to figure things out on my own." I stood there, absorbing his words, but it wasn't enough. I needed more. I needed him to understand the pain I had felt, the agony of being shut out by my own son. I needed him to know that I wasn't trying to control him, that I was only trying to love him in the only way I knew how. "You think it was easy for me," I said, my voice rising despite myself. "You think it was easy to watch you pull away, to feel like everything I did was wrong, like you didn't need me anymore? I spent years of my life giving everything I had to make sure you were okay, and then you turn your back on me." Jason winced as my words cut through the air, but he didn't interrupt. He just stood there, looking like he wanted to say something, but couldn't. "Do you think this is easy for me?" I whispered, softer now. "I've spent my whole life making sure you felt loved, and now you're telling me that everything I've done wasn't enough." Jason looked up at me, his face etched with pain. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said, his voice low. "I didn't know how to deal with it, but I'm trying, okay? I don't want you to leave again. I don't want us to be like this." I stared at him, my heart aching. Trying, that word echoed in my mind. It was enough. It had to be enough. This was the son I had raised, the boy I had given everything for. I knew we couldn't fix it all in one conversation, but this was a start. I took a deep breath, my emotions swirling inside me. "I don't want to lose you, Jason, but I need you to understand that I'm still your mom. I'm not going anywhere. I'm just trying to find a way to be the mother you need, not the one I thought you needed." Jason took a slow step forward, his hand reaching for mine. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said again, his voice raw. "I never meant for it to go this far." For a moment, we stood there in the middle of the living room, the distance between us shrinking with each passing second. The silence that had once felt so oppressive now felt lighter, more bearable. There were still wounds, deep, unhealed wounds, but this was a start. And maybe, just maybe, that was all we needed. I squeezed his hand, not knowing what the future held, but knowing that for the first time in what felt like forever, we had made a step toward healing. And that was enough. As the tension began to fade, I allowed myself to breathe again, allowing the weight of the last few weeks to lift just a little. And in that moment, I realized that even though everything had been broken, maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe we could rebuild. But only time would tell. The days that followed were a blur of quiet conversations and tentative steps toward reconciliation. Jason and I had exchanged a few more words, but each conversation seemed like walking on eggshells, one wrong move, and we'd slip back into the cold distance that had separated us for so long. The walls between us were still there, no matter how much we tried to chip away at them. But every time I saw Jason's face soften, every time he offered a small smile, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. But there were moments, fleeting but sharp, when the old pain would surge back, and I'd find myself questioning everything again. Was it really worth it? Was all this trying, this effort to mend what had been broken, ever going to work? Would Jason truly forgive me for everything I had done wrong, or was I simply fooling myself by hoping that things could go back to the way they once were? It wasn't just Jason that I was trying to fix things with, though. It was Mark, too. The silence between us had stretched so thin that it was practically a living, breathing entity in the house. Every time I caught Mark's eye, I saw the same old weariness, the same resigned indifference that had settled between us like dust in the corners of a forgotten room. I had spent years trying to make everything work, trying to make Jason happy, trying to hold the family together, while Mark quietly retreated into his own world. But now, after everything that had happened, after I had walked away from everything I thought was mine, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit before. Mark and I were just as broken as Jason and I had been. The difference was, we'd learned how to hide it. And now, I wasn't sure we knew how to fix it. That night, after dinner, when Jason retreated to his room, Mark and I found ourselves alone in the kitchen. The room was bathed in the soft glow of the overhead light, the silence stretching between us as I busied myself with the dishes, avoiding his eyes. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to start the conversation, or even if I should. But I knew I couldn't keep pretending that nothing had happened, that everything was fine. "How's he doing?" Mark finally asked, breaking the silence. I turned to face him, startled by the question. I hadn't expected him to ask anything at all, let alone sound so concerned. "Jason?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. "Yeah," he said, leaning against the counter, arms crossed. "Is he really okay? I know he said he was sorry, but is that enough?" I swallowed, unsure how to respond. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't know if it's enough, Mark, but we're trying to fix it. I think he's trying to understand what happened, and I'm trying to understand too, but I don't know if we'll ever be the same." Mark didn't say anything for a moment. His gaze flickered to the window, where the streetlights outside cast long shadows across the floor. I could see the tension in his jaw, the tightness around his eyes. He looked like a man who had been carrying a weight for far too long. "You're right," he finally said, his voice low. "We're all trying, but it's been so long, Julia. You've been trying for so long, and I don't know if there's anything left to fix. I don't know if I can fix it anymore." I felt my stomach tighten at his words. "What are you saying, Mark?" He turned to look at me then, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, something raw, something that spoke of years of hurt and unspoken resentment. "I don't know if I can do this anymore. All of it, the pretending, the silence, the distance. We're not the same people we were when we first met, Julia, and I don't know if we ever will be again." His words hit me like a blow to the chest. For a moment, I felt like the room was spinning, and I had to grip the edge of the counter to steady myself. "Are you saying you want to give up on us?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't know if I'm giving up, but I don't know if I can keep pretending like everything is fine, like we're fine, because we're not." We stood there in silence for what felt like an eternity. The weight of his words settled in the space between us, thick and suffocating. I had never felt more alone in my life. "Mark," I began, but my voice faltered. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? How could I fix something that had been broken for so long, when neither of us seemed to have the strength to try anymore? "I don't want to lose you," I said finally, my voice cracking with emotion. "I don't want to lose this, us, but I don't know how to fix it. I don't know what to do anymore. I don't know if you even want me to try." Mark looked at me, his expression hard to read. He stepped closer, but not too close, as if he was afraid of getting too close. "I don't know if I can be what you need anymore, Julia. I don't know if I ever was." His words stung, but I couldn't blame him. I knew I had neglected him for years, prioritizing Jason, the house, everything else over the man I had promised to spend my life with. I had tried to be the perfect mother, the perfect wife, but in doing so, I had lost sight of who I was, of who we were. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I should have been there more for you. I should have been more present, but I didn't know how to do everything. I didn't know how to be everything to everyone. I didn't know how to fix it all." Mark's eyes softened for a moment, but only for a moment. "I know you tried, Julia, I know you did, But sometimes, trying isn't enough. Sometimes, the damage is too deep to fix with just apologies. I felt a tear slip down my cheek, and I wiped it away quickly, embarrassed. So what does that mean? Are we done? Are you done with me? Mark shook his head, but his expression remained pained. I don't know. I don't know if I can give you what you want anymore, but I'm not ready to give up yet. I'm just tired. I need time to figure things out. I nodded, my heart heavy with the uncertainty of everything. Time. That was the thing we all needed. Time to heal, time to understand, time to figure out what was worth saving. But how much time did we really have? The conversation left a bitter taste in my mouth. Mark wasn't ready to walk away, but he wasn't ready to fully come back either. And neither was I. I had spent so long trying to hold everything together that I had lost myself in the process. I wasn't sure if I could find my way back to who I was, let alone rebuild what had been broken between us. That night, I lay in bed, the darkness surrounding me, and I couldn't help but wonder, was it too late for us? For me and Mark? For me and Jason? For the life I had tried so hard to hold on to? I didn't have an answer. The truth was, I was exhausted. Exhausted from the trying, exhausted from the heartache. I didn't know if I could keep fighting. But at the same time, I couldn't give up, not yet. Not when there was still a chance. Not when there was still love. Even if it was buried beneath layers of hurt, beneath years of mistakes. But what if that wasn't enough? What if we were all too far gone to fix what had been broken? I didn't know, and that terrified me more than anything. I woke up that morning with a sense of finality in the air. It wasn't a momentous, dramatic realization. It was something quieter, something that felt like the world had shifted imperceptibly, and now I was standing in a place where the ground had already given way beneath me. The house felt different, not in the way it had when I first came back, when I was still hopping for some kind of magical resolution. No, now it felt more like a shell of what it had once been. The rooms were still filled with the echoes of the past, the smell of coffee in the kitchen, the creak of the floorboards as I walked down the hall, but everything felt hollow. Everything felt heavy with things left unsaid, things left undone. Jason was in the kitchen when I walked downstairs. He was sitting at the table, his back to me, tapping absent-mindedly on his phone, but the moment I entered, he looked up. His eyes met mine, and for a split second the walls came down. I saw the boy who had once needed me, the boy who had run to me for everything. And then, just as quickly, the walls went back up and the distance returned. "Morning," I said softly, unsure of how to approach him. "Morning," he replied, his voice flat. He didn't smile. He didn't seem happy to see me, but he didn't seem upset either. It was like we were stuck in this strange limbo, where neither of us knew how to bridge the gap between us. I stood there for a moment, unsure of whether I should say anything more. Should I push him to talk? Should I try to explain again? Or should I just let the silence stretch and wait for him to come to me? "Jason," I started but then stopped. There were no easy words, no way to make this right. He sighed, and it was a sound I had come to recognize. It was the sound of frustration, of confusion. "I know you're sorry, Mom," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I know, but I don't know how to get back to the way things were. I don't know if I even want to. Things are different now. They've been different for a while." The words cut through me. I'd known this was coming, but hearing him say it aloud, hearing the finality in his voice, made it all the more real. There was no going back. Jason had changed, and I had no choice but to accept that. But the question that gnawed at me, that had been gnawing at me for weeks now, was this: had I changed too much for him to ever come back? I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. "I don't want things to be the way they were. I don't want to smother you, Jason, but I can't just pretend nothing happened. I can't pretend I'm not hurt or that I don't care." I paused, gathering my thoughts. "You're my son, and I want to be there for you, but I need you to let me." There was a long silence between us, and the weight of those words hung in the air, heavy and uncomfortable. Jason looked down at his phone again, his fingers absent-mindedly scrolling through it, but I could tell his mind wasn't on what was in front of him. It was somewhere else, somewhere far away from me. "Maybe I don't need you to be there for me," he muttered quietly, more to himself than to me. "Maybe I need to figure this out on my own." The words stung, but I didn't show it. I couldn't. I had spent too many years showing him my vulnerability, my weaknesses, and where had it got me? Maybe I need to figure this out on my own. That was the essence of what had pushed us apart in the first place, wasn't it? His desire to distance himself, to push away anything that resembled dependence, anything that resembled the kind of love I had spent years giving him. I turned away from him, my throat tight. I get it, Jason, I do. You're trying to find your own way. But just know that I'm here if you ever need me. You don't have to do it alone. I just want you to know that. I didn't wait for a response. There was nothing more to say. I didn't know what would happen between us, if things would ever go back to how they were, or if this was just the way things were now. But as I stood there in the kitchen, my heart breaking quietly in the background, I realized something. I could love him from a distance. I could still be his mother, but I couldn't force him to need me. That was something he would have to come to on his own. I spent the rest of the morning going through the motions, doing laundry, cleaning the kitchen, putting the house in order. I was trying to keep myself busy, trying to pretend that things were fine, that everything would work itself out. But every time I heard Jason's voice in the other room, or every time I passed by his bedroom, I felt the heavy weight of his distance. And the longer we lived in this strange, fragile truce, the more I wondered if things would ever return to what they once were. Later that day, I saw Mark in the living room, sitting in the armchair, staring blankly at the TV. The room was dimly lit by the soft afternoon sun that filtered through the blinds. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him. There was something so still about him, so lifeless. It made me wonder if he'd given up on me long before I had left. Or maybe, I wondered, he had given up on us both. I cleared my throat, not wanting to startle him. "Mark," I said softly, stepping into the room. He looked up at me, his eyes dark and tired. "Hey," he said quietly, offering a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I hesitated, unsure of where to begin. "We need to talk." Mark's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. He sat up straighter in the chair, his hands resting on his knees. "About what?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "About us, about everything." He nodded slowly, then stood up and walked over to the window, gazing out at the yard. The silence between us stretched, thick and uncomfortable, but I knew it was something we had to face. We couldn't keep ignoring the cracks that had formed between us. We couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it so clearly was. "I know I've been distant," I said, my voice trembling a little. "I know I've pushed you away. I've been so focused on Jason, so focused on trying to fix things with him that I forgot about you. I'm sorry. I never meant to neglect you. I never meant for us to be this way." Mark turned to face me, his expression softening. "I know," he said quietly. "But it's not just that, Julia, it's everything. We've been drifting apart for years now. I don't think either of us really noticed it at first, but now it's too late to ignore it. The distance between us is too wide." My heart dropped as I heard his words, and I felt the sharp sting of the truth. "Mark, I'm not ready to give up on us. I'm not ready to let go of what we had. I know things have been hard, but I want to try. I want to fight for us." He looked at me, his gaze searching mine, as if he was trying to decide if I was telling the truth. After a long moment, he sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know if I can fight anymore, Julia. I don't know if I have it in me, but I'll try. I'll try if you promise me something." "What?" I asked, my voice shaky. "Promise me that you'll stop trying to fix everything all the time. Promise me that you'll stop losing yourself in everyone else's needs and start looking at what you need, at what we need." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had spent so long trying to make everyone else happy, trying to make Jason happy, trying to hold our family together, that I had forgotten what I needed. And now, standing here in front of Mark, I realized that I had neglected myself. I had forgotten to look at what was really important, and I had forgotten to take care of what mattered most. "I promise," I said, my voice trembling with the weight of everything I had failed to see. "I promise I will try. I will try to be present, not just for Jason, not just for you, but for myself too." Mark nodded, but his eyes still held uncertainty. "I hope you mean it," he said softly. I wasn't sure if I did, not completely. But I knew that this was a start. I knew that this was the beginning of the rest of our lives. And maybe, just maybe, we could begin to rebuild. But I also knew one thing for sure. It was going to take time. And maybe that was the hardest part of all. The days that followed felt different. Not easier, but somehow lighter. It was as though the storm had passed, but the aftermath still lingered, its weight heavy in the air. I had made promises to Mark, to Jason, and to myself, but making promises was the easy part. Keeping them, living them, was the challenge. I kept telling myself that things would get better, that everything would fall into place if we just gave it time. But deep down, I knew better. I knew that time alone wouldn't heal the wounds we had inflicted on each other. I had spent so many years looking after everyone else, trying to fix everything, trying to hold it all together, that I had lost sight of who I was. And now, I had to find a way to rebuild, not just my relationship with Mark or Jason, but with myself. I wasn't sure where to start. It wasn't like there was a roadmap for this. For years, I had defined myself by my roles as a wife and a mother. Now, I had to figure out who I was without those labels. The idea was terrifying and liberating all at once. I decided to start small. One morning, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee in hand, staring out the window at the same view I had looked at countless times before. But today was different. Today, I felt a sense of stillness I hadn't felt in years. I was letting go of the frantic pace that had defined my life, and for the first time, I was allowing myself to breathe. Jason came downstairs and walked into the kitchen, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. He didn't speak at first, he never did anymore. But when he saw me sitting there, staring out the window, he hesitated. "Mom," he said softly, breaking the silence, "can we talk?" My heart skipped a beat. It had been days since we had had any real conversation. Sure, we had exchanged pleasantries. How's the weather? What's for dinner? But nothing real. Nothing that made me feel like we were connecting. And now, here he was, asking if we could talk. I couldn't hide the relief that washed over me, even though I knew this conversation could go anywhere. I nodded, setting my coffee cup down on the table. "Of course, what's on your mind?" He pulled out the chair across from me and sat down, his hands nervously fidgeting in his lap. I could see the struggle in his eyes, the desire to open up, but also the fear of being vulnerable. I recognized it. I had seen that same struggle in myself too many times to count. "I've been thinking a lot," Jason began, his voice quiet but steady. "About what happened, about how I treated you, how I pushed you away." He looked at me then, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and something else, regret maybe. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have said the things I said. I was angry and confused and I took it out on you, and I hate myself for it." I felt a lump form in my throat. I had been waiting for him to say those words for so long, but hearing him say them now, sitting there, looking at me with those eyes, made the weight of it all hit me in a way I hadn't anticipated. The pain wasn't gone. It never would be. But in that moment, I realized something important. He wasn't the same person who had pushed me away. He had grown. He had changed. And so had I. "I know you were angry," I said softly, trying to steady my own emotions. "I get that. But Jason, I need you to know that I never meant to hurt you. I never meant to make you feel like I was smothering you. I only wanted to help, to be there for you. I thought I was doing what was best for you. But I see now that I didn't always know what was best." Jason looked down, his fingers tracing the edge of the table. "I know," he said quietly. "I didn't realize how much I needed you, how much I needed your love. But the more you tried to give it to me, the more I pushed it away. I thought I could do it all on my own, but I see now that I can't." The words were simple, but they were the hardest thing Jason had ever said to me. And they were the first real sign of growth, of understanding, that I had seen in him in a long time. I wanted to reach out, to hold him, but I held myself back. This wasn't the time for comfort. This was the time for healing, for moving forward. "You don't have to do it all on your own," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'll always be here for you, no matter what, but you also have to let me in. You have to let me be your mom again." Jason's eyes welled up, and for a moment I saw the boy I had raised, the one who had come to me with scraped knees, with tears in his eyes, looking for comfort. He hadn't been lost, after all. He had just been searching for his own way, his own identity, and in doing so, had pushed away the one person who loved him unconditionally. But now, he was reaching out, and I was reaching back. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I don't know what I would do without you." I stood up then, walking over to him and pulling him into a hug. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. It was the beginning of something new, a new chapter in our relationship, one where we could both learn from our mistakes and move forward with a little more understanding, a little more grace. When we pulled apart, Jason looked at me, his eyes still filled with emotion. Thanks, Mom, he said, a small smile breaking through the tension on his face. I really mean it. I smiled back, wiping a tear from my cheek. I'm just glad you're here. That's all I've ever wanted. The conversation with Jason was a turning point for me. It wasn't the end of our struggles, it wasn't a magic fix, but it was a start. A real start. We had both said things we regretted, but now we were talking. We were listening, and that was the most important part. Later that day, after Jason went back to his room, I found myself sitting on the porch, watching the sunset. The colors in the sky were so vibrant, so full of life, that for the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe there was hope. Maybe we could heal. Maybe I could heal. Mark came out a few minutes later, his face softer than it had been in days. He sat down beside me, and we watched the sun dip below the horizon in silence. The weight between us hadn't disappeared, but it was lighter now, less suffocating. We were still broken, still trying to figure out how to put the pieces back together, but we were trying. I talked to Jason today, I said, breaking the silence. He's not the same, Mark, but he's trying, and I think we're going to be okay. Mark didn't say anything for a moment. He just sat there, looking out at the horizon. And then, finally, he spoke. I hope so, he said quietly. I really do. I turned to him then, meeting his eyes. I'm sorry for everything, Mark, for pushing you away, for neglecting you. I've been so focused on fixing everything else that I forgot about us. I don't know how to fix it all, but I'm willing to try. Mark looked at me, his gaze softening, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. We can try, Julia. We'll figure it out, together. And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. I believed that we could figure it out, that the road ahead, though uncertain, was worth walking. We weren't perfect, and we never would be, but maybe that was okay. Maybe we didn't need to be perfect. We just needed to be real, and real was enough. As the last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon, I let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding. The future was still unknown, still uncertain. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the right path. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Sometimes, the hardest thing to do is let go of what we thought we knew. But in letting go, we make room for something better, something real.